Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Jenny. I'm from Jenny Card Designs. Thanks so much for stopping by today. My YouTube channel contains content that is intended to share paper crafting tutorials and inspiration with all of you. I hope that you enjoy. So for today's video, this is all about distress oxides. I'm going to start with showing you how I swatch my distress oxide ink pads and my blending foam tools. I have one blending foam tool for each of my distress oxide inks, and today I received a shipment from Ranger with some things that I purchased along with some of the new distress oxide ink colors, and I need to swatch them and fit them into my distress oxide collection. So I am going to just sort of go through this process with you and show you how I do this, and then maybe we'll get into some techniques and things with distress oxide inks, but let's start with this swatching. So I've got the Ranger foamed domes. I like these the best. And then I have a sheet of permanent shipping labels. I use these labels to swatch the color and stick them to my ink pads. And then I've got some adhesive that I have in this tube. This was Lawn Fawn liquid glue, but I have it filled with Mod Podge instead, so that I have a precision tip and I can be sure that the swatch is not going to fall off. And then I've got a regular piece of Neenah Classic Crest Solar White 80-pound cardstock. This is a nice smooth cardstock. And then next I have a couple of punches. I have this punch from Stampin' Up, and it's just got a little sort of label or banner with rounded edges. I don't even know where this came from. I've had this in my craft room forever, and I use this for all of my ink pads, and I create a little ink swatch color and then punch it out and stick it to the side of my ink pads. So this is a really great tool to have. And then I also have a 5/8 of an inch circle punch, and I also use this almost every day in my craft room. I use this for my envelopes and for ink swatches and just all kinds of stuff. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to peel the packaging off of these brand new ink pads, and then we'll get into swatching. So I picked up some new blending handles, and I got 5 new colors of ink. I picked up Shabby Shutters, Rustic Wilderness, Kitsched Flamingo, Speckled Egg, and Salvaged Patina. Now, 4 of these ink pads are from the new line of colors that were released this year, and the Shabby Shutters is just a green that I thought I needed in my palette that I didn't have. Okay, so first off, we put one of the foam domes onto the blending tool, and I'm going to ink it up really good. We're going to start with the Salvaged Patina. Let me just say that this is my most favorite color of all of the inks that I own ever. This color is absolutely gorgeous. I love it so much. It's so pretty. So I'm just going to swipe back and forth across my shipping label a couple of times, and then I'll just sort of pounce my tool on the Neenah cardstock and create a little circle swatch, and just make sure that the color is nice and saturated. And I'll just let those dry for a quick second, and I'll take a cloth and wipe away any of the excess ink. I want to make sure that I get my area nice and clean because I don't want to contaminate the next color. So I'm going to move over to the next blending foam, and I'm inking up with Kitsch Flamingo. And this is a really pretty pink. Like, this is really different from anything else that I have in my Oxide collection. It's almost like a bubblegum pink. Super pretty. I really like this. I can't wait to do some fun rainbow blends with some of these new colors. It's going to look so pretty. So I'm going to ink up my shipping label swatch and make sure that I get it good and saturated. I want a nice, rich, saturated color so that I have a good idea of the swatch. Because I don't label the outside of my distress oxide pads with a name, I just put the color. Because to be honest, I don't really care about the name when I'm reaching for a color for my project. So I'll just get this wiped up and give those swatches a chance to dry for a quick second. As you may know, Distress Oxide inks are a pigment ink with a combination of dye ink properties. so it takes a little bit longer for them to dry. So I just give it a quick sec just to dry. And while we're waiting, I just wanted to quickly chat about my work surface. I'm working on my Tonic Studios mini glass mat. I have both the mini and the large, and I find that the mini kind of fits really nicely on my desk, and I don't get any glare if I set my lights up properly. So I kind of like having this little mini glass mat to work on. All right, so let's move to the next step. I'm going to grab my punches and I'm going to punch them out. We'll start with the circle, and then I'll grab the label punch and punch out the selvage patina and the kitsch flamingo. And then I'm going to grab my pokey tool and I'm just going to peel the release paper off the back of this swatch. And I'm just being careful not to touch the front of it. So I just let the label stick to my pokey tool, flip it around, and just lay it on the front side of my ink pad. So I'll just use my pokey tool to smooth it to make sure that it sticks on there, and that looks good. Then next I'm going to take my blending foam tool and my Mod Podge and just put a little bit of adhesive on the top of my blending handle. And then I'm going to take my little circle punch and I'm going to stick that right to the top of my handle. So I get a nice good size swatch of that ink, and then I just press it into the palm of my hand. So this helps sort of get those edges of that cardstock to sort of round over the edge of the handle. So then it just fits nicely, and then it won't kind of peel up or catch on anything or get stuck. So here we go. We have a beautiful swatch of this selvage patina. Super pretty color, absolutely gorgeous. I'm so glad that Tim Holtz came out with this color. It's just stunning. Love it so much. Okay, and then the next we're going to do the kitsch flamingo. We'll do the exact same thing. We'll go through this one more time. I'll peel off the release paper and stick that label to the front of my ink pad. And then once again, I will take the little circle swatch and with a little bit of Mod Podge, I'll glue that to my handle. And that's it. Then we get this beautiful swatch on our tools and on the ink pad. Then I know which handle coordinates with the ink pad. So now that you've seen this, I'm going to swatch out the other few colors so that you can see what they look like. We'll start with a speckled egg. I did my shipping label swatch and then my pounce on my cardstock. And then I'm going to go do the rustic wilderness. This is a nice deep rich green. And I'll do my little pounce as well. And then for the last one, I'm going to do shabby shutters. This one is a very sort of yellow green, almost like a pea soup green almost. If you like pea soup. If not, then this color's not for you. All right, so there we have it. Here are my 5 new Distress Oxide ink colors swatched with their handles. And let's have a look at the shelf that I store them in. This shelf was created, custom made for me by my brother-in-law. I will link their website in my description box down below. The website is called Trail West Custom Designs. And I designed this ink pad storage in mind with my Distress Oxide inks. So I gave him some measurements and the amount of ink pads that I had and how big my ink blending tools were, and this is what he made for me. I super love this. I'm so happy with the results and the way it turns out. I'm still about 12 blending tools away from having a full house over here and 4 more slots available for 4 new colors of ink pads. I don't know if Tim Holtz has 4 more new colors, but if he does, then that's what I will get to fill up these empty spaces. Okay, let's do a couple of techniques with some of these inks. So first I'm going to start by blending some ink. I've got 4 colors of Distress Oxide. I've got Dusty Concord, Blueprint Sketch, Mermaid Lagoon, and Rustic Wilderness. And I'm just inking up onto this paper, not worrying about getting such a fantastic blend. And I'm going to spray a little bit of water over top of these inks and let it sit for a second. And then I'm going to take a cloth and pick up that water. So I'm just absorbing the water and I get this really cool effect. And now I'm going to take this paper over to my trimmer and trim down my panel. and I thought, well, let's do one more thing to this panel to make it really super cool. I'm going to take a Versamark ink pad and I'm going to smoosh it down over top of my panel, and I'm just using direct ink to paper for this. And then I'm going to use some Judikin's Sparkle embossing powder, and I'm going to sprinkle this over top of the entire panel. And I'm going to make sure that I get good coverage, and I'll just sprinkle this onto a piece of scrap paper, and then I'll funnel my embossing powder back into the jar, and then I'm going to heat set this entire panel until all of the embossing powder is melted. And you can kind of see the color transition for this embossing powder, how it's sort of milky, and then as it's transformed it becomes like sparkly. Okay, so that's it for this technique. So this is a super cool, sparkly, easy to make Distress Oxide ink background. Okay, for the next technique, I'm going to ink blend 4 different shades of pink. And I'm creating an ombre effect. It's a really soft and elegant look. And then I've got this old rubber stamp. I think this is an old Stampin' Up stamp, but it's just has love words on it. We're not going to really see the words. It's just going to create some texture. So I'm going to spray this stamp with some water, and then I'm going to lay my panel over top of my rubber stamp and just press. So I want to be careful. I don't want to shift my cardstock around, so I'm always holding the panel in one place as I press down. Okay, and then I'll carefully lift it up, and I'll take my heat tool and I will heat this up and dry it, and then we get this very soft texture in the background, which looks like words, but you can't really read them. So here's a close-up look of what it looks like. I think this is a really nice, subtle, textury background. Super pretty. Okay, for the next technique, I'm going to use this Simon Says Stamp Red Rubber background stamp, and I'm grabbing a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock. And I'm going to take my Oxide inks and I'm going to ink up my rubber stamp with 3 different shades of sort of teal, green, turquoisey colors. I'll lay my cardstock right over top of my stamp and press, making sure that I get a good transfer of ink all the way around my cardstock, and also making sure that I don't shift the panel. And then carefully lift up, and we get a beautiful ombre background. So this is sort of a distressed looking panel, and I wanted to pump up the volume a little bit, so I sprayed it with some water, and you can really see the vibrancy of those colors sort of like pop up once they get wet. So I like that look, and I just take my heat gun and dry this panel so I have a nice distressed looking stamped image for my background. Okay, for the next technique, I thought, okay, I'm going to clean off this stamp, and I sprayed it with water. And instead of letting that ink go to waste, because there's still so much ink on it, I'm going to lay a piece of cardstock over top of it and pick up that extra ink. So we have a similar looking background, more distressed and watercolored looking. And we didn't let that ink go to waste. So this is a really pretty panel. I like the way this turned out too. Okay. Alright, so for the next technique, we're going to use some photopolymer stamps, and I have this little set by Gina K Designs, this little coffee cups. So I'm just going to load them up on some acrylic blocks and just ink them up and stamp them. So you can stamp with Distress Oxide inks, and I mean, they're not the most perfect. They don't smooth out like some dye inks, but I like the way these look. So I'm going to grab my little stamping mat. This is a stamping mat that I designed to help me get good even stamped pressure when I stamp with acrylic blocks. Sometimes I don't get the best image when I stamp on my glass surface. Okay, so I stamped with a few different colors, tried those out. They look super cute. You can fussy cut these and pop them up onto cards. Okay, for the next technique, I'm going to use direct to paper. I'm taking these Oxide ink pads and just swiping them gently across a piece of cardstock. I'm not pressing super hard. I don't want to saturate the paper. I just want to get like a sort of like a scuffed looking background. So I did 3 colors in rainbow order, and I didn't really like it, but I thought, let's cut the panel down. Sometimes if you don't like whatever design you have, try cutting your panel down into a usable card front. You may find that you like the design after that. Once I trimmed it down, I really liked the way that looked. I thought it was really pretty, and it will be a nice background for a thank you card or something fun. I haven't quite decided, but I like the way it looks. For the next technique, we're going to do some ink smooshing. So I'm just taking the ink pad and I'm pressing it down onto my glass mat, and then I'll spray it with water. I chose 4 different colors of teals and blues, and I have a piece of Bristol smooth cardstock, and I'm just going to tap into those wet spots on the ink. So this is going to be very distressed looking, messy, sort of crazy looking background, and it's a very like watercolor loose look, and I love the way this turns out. So I keep spraying the ink with more water, and it dilutes it and becomes a lighter shade, and you can layer these inks on top of each other. And then I dry the panel with my heat gun and continue layering up different colors of ink. So I thought this needed a little bit of bright blue, so I just added some Salty Ocean and sprayed that and continued layering up this color on this panel. So you can keep going and make a crazy mess. Sometimes I tend to go too far and then I don't like it. So when you kind of like the way it looks, stop. Stop what you're doing, get another piece of cardstock. I like the way this panel turned out specifically, but sometimes I go a little too far and wish I could erase, and that's not the case. So I'm going to clean up this mess. And so that's it. Here are all of the different panels that we made, just playing with some Distress Oxide inks. You can get very distinctly different designs just by stamping, adding water, swiping, smooshing, all different kinds of stuff. Oh, and don't forget glitter heat embossing. You can use any sort of embossing powder. It doesn't have to be glitter, but these are really fun backgrounds, and I love my Distress Oxide inks. And I had some fun creating these panels, and maybe I'll turn them into some cards. But for now, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to spend it here with me. I appreciate the support as always. Coming up on screen are a couple of videos I think you may enjoy. Thanks again for watching. Have yourself a lovely day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!